What if I told you that in 1947, a car rolled out of Los Angeles that made concept cars look like they were afraid of commitment, a car that was part convertible, part airplane experiment, and part living room furniture? This wasn't just another quirky post-war oddity. This was the Davis Divan, a three-wheeled sofa on wheels that promised America the future, delivered almost nothing, and still managed to earn a permanent place in the Museum of Automotive Absurdity. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this one. Now, before we really dive in, let me sneak in one quick thing. If you like stories about forgotten cars, failed dreamers, and bizarre machines that never should have worked but somehow existed, hit that like button and subscribe. That way, you won't miss the next time we uncover another piece of history so weird it makes modern concept cars look boring. All right, plug over. Let's get into the wild saga of the Davis Divan. The man behind this story was Glenn Gordon Gary Davis. And if that name doesn't ring a bell, don't worry. There's a reason his company isn't around today. Gary Davis wasn't an engineer, he wasn't a designer, and he certainly wasn't Henry Ford. He was a used car salesman. But what he lacked in technical know-how, he more than made up for in confidence. Davis could sell snow to Eskimos. He could convince you a garden rake was a futuristic weapon if he shined it up and gave it a catchy name. And in the heady days, right after World War II, when the world was obsessed with jets, rockets, and tomorrow's technology, that kind of smooth talking could get you very, very far. So where did the Davis Divan come from? The origin story is a cocktail of Hollywood flair, racing ingenuity, and one man's talent for stretching the truth. The design was heavily based on a custom three-wheeled roadster called the Californian. That one-off machine was built for wealthy playboy and racer Joel Thorne by Frank Curtis, the same Curtis who designed cars for the Indianapolis 500. Davis somehow got hold of that car and thought, hey, this could be my ticket to fame. Add in a little inspiration from the Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighter plane, specifically its tricycle landing gear, and suddenly Davis had a vision, a sleek, three-wheeled automobile that looked like an airplane without wings. And I'll give him credit, the thing looked unlike anything else on American roads in 1947. Imagine every post-war sedan of the time, boxy, heavy, full of chrome. And then picture the Divan. Smooth, streamlined aluminum bodywork, hidden headlamps, flush door handles, and even a removable fiberglass top. In a world still dreaming about jetpacks and flying cars, the Divan looked like tomorrow had arrived. But the real party trick was inside. Forget the standard front bench and rear bench layout. The Divan had one enormous seat. One Divan, in fact, hence the name. 4 passengers could sit side by side, shoulder to shoulder, like a group of friends waiting for a bus that suddenly decided to drive itself. Imagine piling your whole family onto a sofa, strapping in and heading down the highway. It was bold, it was weird, and it was actually kind of cozy. And Davis wasn't done with the gimmicks. He added something genuinely clever. Built-in hydraulic jacks at all 4 corners. Flat tire? No problem. Flip a lever, the car jacks itself up. You're not wrestling with a crank by the side of the road. You're standing there like a magician, letting your car do the heavy lifting. Honestly, even modern cars could use that trick. Now, let's talk numbers. Under the body sat a steel chassis. Most production models ran a 2.6-litre Continental 4-cylinder engine, pumping out about 63 horsepower. Earlier prototypes used a Hercules industrial engine with a much more modest 47 horses. All were hooked to a 3-speed Borg-Warner manual transmission. On paper, Davis bragged about a top speed of 100 miles an hour, sometimes even claiming 116. In reality, if you hit 80, you were probably drafting behind a truck, praying that single front wheel held its nerve. But the economy figures were genuinely surprising. Reports claimed anywhere from 35 to 50 miles per gallon, which, for 1947, was almost science fiction. Handling, though, That was where reality came crashing in, or wobbling in. Remember, the Divan had 2 wheels in the back, 1 wheel in the front. That single nose wheel did all the steering and all the braking. The result? Turning felt a lot like wrestling a stubborn shopping cart, and braking too hard risked a nosedive that could scare the life out of you. Sure, Davis advertised aircraft-style maneuverability and impossible to roll over, but in practice, if you took a corner too aggressively, that so-called impossible rollover suddenly looked a lot more possible. But here's the thing, Gary Davis didn't care. He wasn't building the perfect car. He was building a story. He was building hype. And in that department, he was world-class. He promised America a car that was half the price of a regular sedan, twice as efficient, stylish beyond belief, and safer than anything else on the road. He didn't just pitch cars, he pitched dealerships. His business model was pure gold rush energy. He sold franchises to dealers before he even had production sorted, and investors ate it up. Davis raised over $1.2 million selling the dream of a 3-wheeled convertible sofa to America. For a while, it worked. The Davis Divan even landed in Life magazine in 1948. Glamour shots showed off its smooth lines, its futuristic styling, its cozy 4-across interior. Imagine being a car buyer at the time. Fords and Chevrolets looked like farm equipment compared to this sleek, shiny oddball. The Divan really did look like the future had landed. But then came reality. Between 1947 and 1949, the Davis Motorcar Company built exactly 16 cars. 16! Not hundreds, not thousands, just 16. And that included prototypes. The shiny production line at Van Nuys Airport, housed in a former aircraft hangar, never came close to mass-producing vehicles. Workers went unpaid. Dealers started to notice there were no cars to sell, and investors began asking questions that Davis couldn't answer. Eventually, the lawsuits piled up. Dealers sued, employees sued, and in the end, the state of California sued. Gary Davis was hauled into court, convicted of fraud, and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Just like that, the Davis Motorcar Company went from car of the future to footnote in history. So, what's left today? Out of the 16 Divans built, a handful survive, lovingly restored by collectors. You can see them at places like the Lane Motor Museum, where they sit gleaming under the lights, confusing everyone who walks past. At car shows, they draw crowds not because they were successful, but because they were weird. They look like something out of an alternate timeline, where aircraft engineers took over Detroit. People stop, stare, and smile. And that's really the legacy of the Davis Divan. It failed as a car, it failed as a company, but it succeeded as a story. It proved that sometimes, even if you crash and burn, or wobble and roll over, you can still leave behind something worth remembering. So, let's recap. The 1947 Davis Divan was a 3-wheeled convertible sofa inspired by airplanes, powered by modest engines, hyped by a salesman who could charm the chrome off a bumper, and remembered today, not for what it achieved, but for how wildly it dared to dream. Or, put another way, it was the car that proved sometimes you don't need wings to crash and burn. Thanks for sticking with me through this ride. And remember, if someone tries to sell you the future on 3 wheels, maybe make sure more than 16 of them actually exist before you invest.